What's up, beautiful people? It is I, your lavishing Bostonian, your steward of Gundor, your genius, billionaire, playboy, basic YouTuber philanthropist, SuperCliff. And if you like what you see, /here, hit that like and subscribe button, for every little bit helps in this YouTube world. And welcome, friends, to another comic book review video, where I say words and you listen. Detective Comics, issue 1028, is written by the glorious PeterJTomasi and drawn by Nicola Scott. And this issue begins in Gotham City, at Gleason Self-Storage, where we follow Detective Gotis, who's pulling up next to a storage unit, informing whomever it is that he's talking to that the deposit is currently being made. But unfortunately, Gotis is taken by surprise from an assailant whom Gotis thought was once dead. And also, this dude's on a horse. Spooky! Assumingly days later, we shift to Detective Gotis' funeral, where Bruce Wayne, Gotis' family, and those among the GCPD, including Officer Nakano, whom was shown to be injured in Detective Comics 1027, are present to pay their respects. I would also like to mention that we are given a shining example on how Bruce Wayne functions during funeral processions. Like, holy shit, Bruce. Dude is legitimately grilling the entire crowd. And not only that, but Bruce is using this as an opportunity to get information from his mad skills in lip reading and parabolic earbuds. As Bruce weighs in on people's conversations, we hear that the mayor and his crony are talking smack about Bruce Wayne's presence. Next, the mayor begins thanking Bullock for the discretion involving the murder as a way into not immediately stirring the public. And lastly, we hear a couple of cops gossiping, saying how they heard Gotis was found decapitated when the cops found him. Yo, that's messed up. Later that night, at the cemetery, Batman's all suited up as he begins his detective work. Taking out a scanning device built by him and Mr. Miracle, Batman begins scanning Gotis' gravesite. Batman's device manages to pick up the gunshot wound on Gotis' hand. Batman then heads over to GCPD's evidence room to scan the bullet slugs found at the crime scene. Batman discovers that the slugs are from a .357 Service 6 revolver, which is strange because only old school peeps would have their hands on a weapon such as that. Afterwards, we shift scenes inside of a lovely home where the TV's blaring about putting an end to vigilantism in Gotham City. We are then shown that this house is actually owned by the Killer Horseman, as we witness him readying his sword to take out his next victim, that being a man named Judge Horwitz, whose head is found in the refrigerator, Seven style. And while Batman is investigating the crime scene, we see Bullock show up. But unfortunately for Bats, Bullock ain't having none of his shit today, thereby threatening Batman that he'll have his cops shoot him on sight. But Batman calls his bullshit and immediately jumps out of the window. Next, we witness the Killer Horseman chop off another victim's head, and it's only afterwards where a prosecutor, a mutual acquaintance to the victims, receives a call from the Killer Horseman, who's using his most recent victim's phone. The Killer Horseman demands that the prosecutor is to meet him at the GCPD mounted stable section within the hour, along with the DAT tapes. Oh, and if this guy fails to do so, Horseman's going to butcher his entire family. An hour later, we shift to the GCPD's stable section, where the Killer Horseman is shown to be waiting for the prosecutor's arrival. Now check it, this Killer Horseman has been wearing a mask of the late officer Jake Holman, his father, for our killer is Stephen Holman, his son. And back in the day, Jake Holman discovered that 4 trusted officials were at the top of a drug ring, stealing and selling drugs from convicted drug lords. Eventually, Jake was picked up by Internal Affairs to investigate, getting in tight with the peeps, whilst unbeknownst to them, he was taping all their conversations. But sadly, an officer on their payroll spilled the beans on Jake's motives. Therefore, the assholes forced him to turn in the tapes, only to then have Jake kill himself, taking the blame. Steve now wants the same done to the prosecutor, but by using a shotgun to the face. Boom, headshot. But like a bat out of hell, literally, Batman shows up to cease such madness. Steve Holman then attempts to make a getaway, but Batman gives chase, because the world needed to witness a beautiful craftsmanship, showcasing Batman riding a black steed throughout the night. Now, eventually Batman catches Holden, and it's here where Batman lays down some hard truths for Steve, as our Dark Knight tells the murderer that what happened to Jake Holden, his father, was a tragedy, and that those responsible will see justice. But because of Steve's actions, he has unfortunately stained and dishonored his father's legacy. Afterwards, once the Killer Horseman and the prosecutor are in prison, we see Bruce feeling pretty good about himself. Unfortunately, Bruce's feel-good session going to have to clock out, as Christopher Nakano, ex-cop from Detective 1027 and from earlier at the funeral, declares at a live conference that he will do everything in his power to rid masked vigilantes in the city of Gotham, as he announces his candidacy for Gotham City Mayor. Detective Comics issue 1028 was another great issue given to us by the glorious PeterJTomasi. Now, one of the many reasons as to why I feel Tomasi's Detective is the best Batman book currently is mainly due to its simplicity, its ability to just say no to certain temptations that tend to widely overhype certain Batman books within the industry. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying books such as Tynan's Joker War or Jeff Johns' Three Jokers are bad books, nor should readers give less of their attention towards. Essentially, what I'm saying is that at the end of the day, when you pick up a Tomasi Batman book, including this one, you'll be getting a Batman book who's doing Batman things that Batman would say or do that are true to his character. Like, if I'm going to be totally honest, with Detective Comics, you will always get your simple Batman story taking place on a basic Tuesday, rather than a Batman story that's quote-unquote 80 years in the making, with new characters like Punchline and 20,000 Jokers and 52 multiverses, shitting out a legion of Superboy Primes. No, you're just not going to get any of that crap. You're going to get simplicity, folks. Now, in regards to this specific issue, I really dug the Sleepy Hollow theme to this book. Since it's around the Halloween season, it's always nice to get a little spookiness. Plus, seeing Batman riding a horse is never boring. Ever. Detective Comics issue 1028 gets an 8 out of 10. Giggity goo.